Tap it for me. Hey, who hit live?
That would be me. I am so sorry.
Dude.
I know. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to the jungle. All right. Just for shits and giggles, I'm going to hit you with the intro anyway. Here we go.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say it the first time I said Ron?
Because it's pronounced Aaron?
You done messed up, Ron!
You done messed up, Jeff. No,
I done messed up so hard. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I am new to the StreamYard thing, and I have very itchy fingers.
You and Mitch Brisker share the honors of being the only two to go live. Anyway, I'm just and actually you saved me from being later than I was already going to be, to be honest.
There you go.
Hit that mic for me though, just so I can make sure we're. Sounds beautiful. That is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going, Jeff?
It's going very well. How are you?
Good. I don't think I had a chance to link to your YouTube channel in the description down below yet, but I'll do that while we're chatting. Tell everyone the name of your channel. It's PTS for Life, right?
PTS for Life, yeah. It represents just being on planet Earth. We are, after all PTS, and there are SPs everywhere.
It's true. You know, the only ones who have any superpowers, special OT powers in Scientology are the SPs, it turns out. We can cause Scientologists to lose all of their gains just by merely being in their presence. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing how they can't comfortably speak on any topic.
That's right. That's right. You know, for my longtime dedicated viewers, they've heard me tell stories about one of my favorite Sea Org members that I worked with when I was in Los Angeles, and that is your nephew, the one and only Huckleberry Taylor, or more commonly known as Huck Taylor. But I always told him, you can be my Huckleberry.
He hates the name Huckleberry.
I know he does. And it is his real legal name, right?
Yep, absolutely. We used to call that when we were growing up. We hung out, we grew up all together. And yeah, and his brother's name is Hector. So
Hector.
Yeah,
that's right. And Huck, man, I mean, how young was Huck when he joined the Sea Org? Could he have been as young as 12 or 13?
I think it was 12. Yeah.
Wow. You know, so when I was in Los Angeles, I hesitate as to whether to use the Scientology words or not, but I was the TechSec Ash O'Day. Huckleberry was the briefing course practical supervisor, and Huck has no idea how much I loved him as a staff member. I mean, yeah, you know, seniors don't fraternize with juniors really, but I hope he knows. I hope he watches. I hope he knows how much I admired and respected the job that he did when he was there, and they treated him like shit. His senior Jim Plett treated him like shit. Bill Screevers treated him like shit. So, I was like, I was his senior. So I at least tried to do what I could do to make his life a little easier. But man, his seniors just really, for some reason, I don't know what it was. When he was in the Sea Org, did you have much contact with him?
No. And in fact, I don't think he ever had the opportunity to come up and visit his family. Maybe once or twice, but I didn't see him the entire time, with the exception of if I went down to LA for, you know, some reason, I'd run into him, but maybe once or twice.
I'm so glad he's out of the Sea Org. I hope one day he can full on leave Scientology, but who knows? And actually, that's how you and I first got in touch years ago. Yep. Is I mentioned Huck in one of my videos, and you're like, I think you emailed me and said you mentioned my nephew in a video today, and I was like, oh my God, Huck's uncle. So let's talk. You know, let's talk about. Well, let's talk about your story. Let's talk about your story. Maybe help me understand a little bit how your story, your upbringing, your family relates to Huck and his upbringing and his family, but mostly we'll just talk about you. So for my audience, how old are you?
I'm 41.
You're 41. Okay, so we're I just turned 43, so we're
happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. How old would you guess Huck is at this point?
You know, I couldn't say for sure, but I want to say he's about 6 years younger than me.
That much.
It's not that he's pretty old for a nephew, I guess. It was always kind of strange. Because I was, you know, when we were growing up, I was very young to be a nephew, and I actually had Hector and Sally, who's my niece. So, yeah. So he's not that much younger than me.
Okay, so if you're 2 years younger than me and he's 6 years younger than you, I'm not that good at math because I grew up in a cult, but that makes him about 8 years younger than me. And I joined the Sea Org in LA when I was 22, so that would have made him about 14. And he was already that would have made him about 14, and he was already a posted BC practical supervisor. So he'd already been in the Sea Org for years.
His mom and dad were so proud of him, and the whole family, for achieving that. Like, that's a huge thing. Back then, when the briefing course was actually a thing, it was the pinnacle of training.
That's right.
And now, of course, David Miscavige got rid of it because it's quote unquote out tech.
That's right. If someone would have said 20 years ago that David Miscavige would get rid of the St. Hill Special Briefing Course because it wasn't standard tech, people would have been like, anyone who even said such a thing would have been declared a suppressive person.
Well, on that note, though, and this is going to get a bit complicated. I'll make it very short. But so my mom was on staff in Vancouver, and she was with the senior CS at the time, Frank, who actually wrote a KR on David Miscavige for the out tech. And as a result, he got declared. They used the excuse that he blew from flag and blew from staff because he was in training, but he wrote a KR on him, and that got him declared essentially.
Wow. Do you know what the out tech was that he was reporting?
Oh, just everything in regards to the Vancouver org and the training, and long story. And I don't know all of it, but
Got it. So your Scientology upbringing and your Scientology history, does it mostly involve Vancouver?
Almost exclusively, yeah.
I've been to Vancouver, so at least I know it's a West Coast city. At least I don't know much. I grew up in a cult, but I know where Vancouver is.
Hollywood North.
And I'm just going to jump around a little bit here, so just so the viewers get a bit of a taste of what exactly your history involves. So, so your mom was the executive director of the Vancouver org?
No, so my dad she was actually the FBO back before it was a Sea Org post.
Yeah.
So the flag banking officer, so in charge of like coordinating, basically sending money up to flag to use Scientology. And then my dad was the executive director of CCHR. However, he was not qualified for staff actually. And so he just volunteered for that position.
Interesting. So CCHR is Scientology's anti-psychiatry front group, stands for Citizens Commission on Human Rights. That's an interesting organization that I haven't really talked much about it in any of my videos. But so you ended up in the C organization in Los Angeles as well. And I was interested, I guess I always thought that, because there's a Sea Org based in Toronto. It's the Continental Management office for Toronto, which is always staffed by Sea Org members. And I've always wondered how the hell that office was ever able to recruit people for the Sea Org. Like, I was like, good luck getting a United States citizen to go to Canada to join the Sea Org when they could join in LA or Clearwater. And you were Canadian, and instead of joining the Sea Org in Canada, you ended up joining in Los Angeles anyway. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, there's always missions flying around to different continents and just reaching out to basically rip people off from public and staff from different orgs. But yeah, there was just a mission sent up, and they saw that I had been on some courses, like the Success Through Communication and Ups and Downs in Life course. And because I grew up in a Scientology school, had a pretty clean background, they thought, oh, this is the perfect candidate of a child, 14-year-old, to drag down the States. They actually coached me on what to tell customs when I was going down, because you have to have a religious worker's visa. And they just brought me right down right away. And as a kid, you don't have a lot of ties to the community. You don't have a house to sell or cars or a spouse to explain why you're doing this. And I just got shipped off.
Wow. So there was enough Scientologists in Vancouver to justify opening up a Scientologist run school?
Yeah, actually, especially in the 80s and 90s, there was quite a few more active Scientologists. There are very few now. It doesn't exist anymore, and it hasn't since about probably 98. It had switched from a school called Effective Education to Heritage 3Rs. And both times it was run by, I believe they were ex-Sea Org members. One lady, name was Jenny, and the other person was Gail. They're both active currently. They were the quote unquote principals of the school.
Is Gail a man or a woman?
It's a woman.
Okay. Okay.
She's a pretty big player in the Vancouver field, as is her husband, both OT, whatever, and very big donors as well.
So my brother-in-law's wife, her parents are huge, wealthy OT8 muckety mucks in Vancouver. And I don't remember their names. And I don't even remember her maiden name. I mean, her name is Holly Tozier, presently, because she's married to my brother-in-law. But how many wealthy OT8s can there be in Vancouver? Did Vancouver, one of these, because actually Vancouver's a wealthy city, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. If you own a house in Vancouver, you got some money for sure. Or at least you better hope you do, because the real estate's insane.
That's right. The Chinese have come and just purchased everything, right? Driven prices through the roof.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, there's definitely there was a lot more vacancy. Like they just buy a house and just leave it vacant. So just for real estate reasons, but they crack down a bit on it. So there's more taxes on it. I mean, adding more taxes on the things doesn't stop someone who's rich.
That's true.
Pay more money. So
that's true. I don't want to digress too much, but my sister-in-law's or my brother-in-law's wife, and I'm mentioning this because I'm curious if you know who these people are, even though I can't remember her maiden name. They have some like big horse farm, or they don't call them farms. What do you call a property with horses on it?
A ranch.
A horse ranch.
Sure.
They're just wealthy OT8s in the Vancouver area who, have a big horse ranch. Does that ring any bells?
I don't know specifically, but if they're in Vancouver and they're wealthy and they're Scientologist, I know who they are. I just don't know that story. Susan Kerr?
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm almost positive. I
want to make a note on this. By the way, that's Gabrielle, Escaping the Cultiverse. She has her own channel too. Her and I will be doing some videos. She lives in Toronto area now. But we were both on staff together. She was the ED of Vancouver for a while and has a huge story to tell. But Susan Kerr, when I was 14 and I came back from the Sea Org, I was feeling, to put it in YouTube terms, I felt like unaliving myself. And I had major feelings with this and had attempted it at one point. And eventually it came out in a confessional because I was quote unquote out ethics. And Susan Kerr was the DSA at the time.
Yes.
Yep.
That's right.
So when she found out, she pulled me in and she told me that if I went through with that I would come back worse than I was now. And that's what you tell a 14-year-old who's having these thoughts in Scientology.
Wow. That's actually pretty smart. Scientologically speaking, that's a pretty good way to convince somebody not to do that.
Yep. And it worked, but you know what? It never actually solved the problem. So
Right. So can I ask a question real quick? You said her name's Gabrielle?
Gabrielle, yes.
Gabrielle.
So
Gabrielle, I'm watching the live chat. She answered the question I was just going to ask. Her daughter is Holly, and her maiden name is Burnham. There you go. Well, Holly is married to Adam Tozier, who is my brother-in-law. And just for the record, Adam and Holly are not Scientologists. No. They hate Scientology. But because Holly's parents have said, if you talk to Aaron and Heather, we're going to disconnect from you. And because Adam's parents said, if you talk to Aaron and Heather, we're going to disconnect from you. Even though these guys are not Scientologists, hate Scientology, they have disconnected from us and our kids. We haven't spoken to them in many, many years, even though they live very near us. And that is why I say Hulk Hogan's wife is a Scientologist, even though Hulk Hogan's wife will probably say she's not a Scientologist. If you're in good standing and you're connected to your OT8 Scientologist parents, you're a fucking Scientologist, whether you think you are or not. That's how I feel about it.
At the very least, you're under the rules and direction of Scientologists.
Absolutely.
There's no way around it.
Absolutely. Well, maybe me, you, and Gabrielle can do a group chat sometime or something like that. That would be fun.
Dreamy.
So where do you want to start? What part of your story do you think is most interesting for us to discuss?
I think the Sea Org aspect of it and being on staff, probably the most formative though would be the fact that my dad being the executive director of CCHR, my whole like brain chemistry is set up to believe that psychiatry is bad. and I was put in towards, like, I was set up in newspaper articles with pictures of me with pills being shoved down my throat by, you know, this lady. Her name was Lillian. I don't think she's around anymore. But she was dressed up as a doctor, you know, like, and shoving this pill down my throat and put on the front page of the newspaper when I was like 9. Right. So I'm being involved in all this stuff, and it just how it basically formed the way that I think, and indoctrinated me into not being able to reach for help. I think that's the most important and destructive aspect of Scientology, is its ability to make members not reach for other help when that's what's really needed.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I'd be lying if I said I've completely shaken, you know, that way of thinking. Not like I actively think that way. I still have the residue of the bias against, you know, organized, institutionalized mental health. When I say institutionalized, I don't mean institutions, but I mean the institution of the mental health industry. I'd be lying if I said I've shaken all, because it's like, how it's so hard to shake. It's part of you.
Yeah. Well, you and I grew up in Scientology.
Yeah.
It's us. There's no way around it. There's no way to escape it. You can change your thinking, but it's always there. That's the way the brain works.
That's right. Yeah, you can change the way you're thinking, but it's because you have to actively calibrate it. You're always having to go, well, this is how I am, and I have to change. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's like flipping the calibration wheel on an airplane. It's a constant force.
Yeah. And if you don't recognize it while it's happening, like, that's the biggest part of my recovery, which has been about 10 years. I've been out for watching your channel, watching Chris Shelton. Probably one of the first videos I've seen with you was with Mike Rinder, your multi-part series. And I remember watching Mike Rinder on events, and like that, like, oh, this guy's not in anymore. And, you know, that was huge for me. But the biggest part of my recovery has been recognizing, and then also reevaluating and changing my thinking into something that is more manageable and real for reality, basically, you know.
Other than that, so your dad was the ED of CCHR. That's kind of a big deal.
Huge.
Like, most of Scientology is focused in some way, shape, or form on actually doing Scientology or forwarding Scientology. Only CCHR is dedicated 100% of the time to exposing psychiatry, taking down psychiatry, jailing psychiatrists. Like, well, in LA, they've got the famous Psychiatry and Industry of Death Museum, which is, you ever been there?
Oh yeah. It was a joy to go to when I was in. Right. It's like, this is amazing what we're doing. 'Cause, you know, I was still so stuck in that mindset.
It's so over the top.
Yeah.
Like, it's so almost comical, but I remember going through it when because sometimes when we were in the Sea Org, we would just have people every now and then tour through it just to like see what was, you know, what the social betterment groups were accomplishing. And I remember watching all these videos and going like, oh my God, any VIP or opinion leader who comes through here couldn't help but be on our side and have their minds changed. And how did you feel about all that content?
Totally the same. Like, I went down there for the Golden Age of Knowledge release. At the time, I was the bookstore officer at Vancouver Foundation. And we went down there and we did a tour as a group, just to check it out, because we were down there and looking at this thinking, oh, look at the truth we're putting out there. And because I'd never been involved in anything psychiatric or psychology through my entire life, other than what LRH says, that's all I could think of. This is true. If you go into a psych institution, they're literally just randomly giving lobotomies, electroshocking everybody, over drugging people, all this stuff, right? So that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh wow, we're getting the truth out. This is great. We're amazing. And all it does is beef up the indoctrination and gaslight any kind of potential thought for thinking otherwise, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's really well done.
It is. I mean, it's one thing Scientology spends its tax exempt money on that they're really good at is producing AV, pretty high end AV
Mhm.
content, the multimedia stuff. Um, so for you, how was your experience as a staff member in Vancouver? How did that compare to your experience being a Sea Org member?
Well, so the thing with my Sea Org career is I never left the EPF or the boot camp for Sea Org. So I never
Okay.
truly became an actual Sea Org member. Um, but so my last time joining, I was on Class 5 org staff. I was in training for a post that is the establishment officer.
Mm.
So it's essentially hatting and training people and hiring and stuff like that.
And where were you doing that training?
That was in so the training was being done in Vancouver.
Mm.
I had just started, and then I got ripped off by the person who's in charge of the books in Canada. Her name is Emily, and she was a member of Bridge Publications. She was leaving her post and wanted me to replace it. She knew me because I was a bookstore officer and I was good at selling stuff.
And what was Emily's post at Bridge?
So she was the Continental Publication Liaison Officer. So the
Huh.
person in Canada, though. So I was joining the Sea Org in Canada.
Oh,
But
okay.
just to, it's all very complicated, right?
Go ahead. I don't care. I
always
like
have
hearing
to be
about it.
Scientology.
You can tell me.
Okay. So I was in Vancouver. I got recruited by her to take over for her post, sent to Ontario, which is on the East Coast, or not quite East Coast, but Eastern area, basically above Detroit.
Okay.
And
So Toronto, Ontario.
yeah, just outside of Toronto, Ontario.
Because that's where the CLO is?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And they were just building this whole the new AO was going in.
Oh, you did you get to see where they were trying to build a new AO? Did you see the location?
I went there before it was even renovated. They had bought the building. It was an absolute shithole. Rats everywhere. Like this thing, it was basically an old resort that they bought, and it was a beautiful property, but the building was garbage.
Yeah.
They were very proud of it though.
What year would you have seen it? Been there?
This was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just prior to me leaving. But anyway, so I went to Ontario, was on the EPF there. Now this EPF was myself, I think about a 14 or 15-year-old French girl who was going into CMO. And there was one RPFer there. So not exactly on the same level as, say, like the big blue building in LA, right?
So in all of Canada, by the way, the French girl, was she on the regular EPF or the CMO EPF?
Well, it's all one and the same.
Well, you do the CMO EPF after you finish the regular EPF.
Okay, so she was on the regular one. She had just been recruited.
So in all of Canada, there were 2 people in the process of joining the Sea Org.
In Ontario, anyway, yes.
But that's the only. That's the only Sea Org base in Canada.
Sure, but sometimes they'll go down to Los Angeles for their EPF.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
because there is nothing. So the dude who ran the EPF in Ontario was probably 80, hunched over at a 90-degree angle. His name was Peter, and like when you're talking about elders being abused and put to work, he was essentially the EPF in charge plus the maintenance guy for this whole property, right? So, and he was old. So I was there. I got a dental issue where I needed to have a tooth taken care of, and I had no money. They refused to pay for it. It was a root canal I needed. So I paid out of my own money to get my tooth taken care of. But instead of root canal, which is expensive, the doctor yanked it. And I just told him that I had no money. I worked for Scientology, and he kind of gave me this smoking deal. But after that happened, they realized that the EPF happening up in Ontario was not doing very well. So they booted me down to LA to finish it up, and right down the bridge. And that's when things went completely off the rails for me.
Wow. So you were on the EPF in LA, slated. Were you supposed to go, like, if you had finished the EPF, were you supposed to go to Bridge in LA or back to Toronto?
So I would get training in Bridge, but I would ultimately be posted in Toronto at the CLO there.
Interesting. All right. So what was that experience like in LA? What happened there?
Well, Bridge is a beautiful facility. It's phenomenal. It's world class. Like, that's true. But basically the regimented attitude of people there were completely different than what I was used to. You know, I was used to being on staff at Class 5 orgs, and it's much slacker because you go home, you know, you eat your own food, you do all this stuff. But when I was down there, I realized that I was trapped. And signing that billion-year contract, I truly realized that this isn't for me. Probably about 2 weeks afterwards, as soon as they found out I had a phone, which they were supposed to have taken away from me before I went to Ontario, but they didn't. Funny story. I was actually reading anti-Scientology stuff while in my bunk in Ontario, because I was all alone, right? There's only two of us, and they're not going to put a guy and a girl in the same room. So yeah, I just realized that it was not what it was sold to me as. And I told the Has, which is the person who's in charge of the personnel in the Sea Org, and as well as in other organizations. His name is Hans. He's a younger German guy.
Hans. And this was at Bridge. That has of Bridge.
The
Guys,
Has of Bridge.
in the live chat, if anyone remembers Hans's name, because I think I know exactly who you're talking about. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
So I sat down in the room and I said, look, I want to leave. And I was very important. This is a pretty big project. And according to them, they'd spent a lot of money on me, flying me down, feeding me, whatever. And I said, no, I'm out. And so he spent about 40 minutes ripping me a new one, telling me how bad I was for signing and wanting to leave, how much they spent on me. And I just said, look, man, I said, F off. I'm going now. And he relented. So I actually don't remember who paid for my plane ticket to go home, but I actually think I had to find the money somehow.
I'm texting my wife right now because she was at Bridge for a long time, and she's gonna remember who Hans. He was the Has last name. Okay, we'll see what she says. Okay, so who was your EPFIC when you were in LA?
I don't recall the guy's name. Whoever was in 2012.
Was it my arch nemesis, Ben? Ben. Oh my God. What's his name, guys? Oh my God, Ben. I've mentioned him in my videos. Guys, who's my arch nemesis? The guy said if I see him on the street, no matter how many years have gone by, I'm going to deck his ass. Oh my God.
I'm not going to be able to confirm this anyway.
Well, he's a huge guy. Huge, loud guy. Does that ring a bell?
No.
It's not Ben Dover, guys.
So I was, the funny thing is,
Ben Monahan. Yes.
Monahan. The name doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. My biggest fan, Apostate Alex, by the way.
You said what?
My biggest fan, Apostate Alex.
Your biggest fan is Apostate Alex?
Yeah. Love that guy. The funny thing with me, like, I don't remember actually being in the EPF in 2012 down there. It was different than in 96 when I was down there. Like, I think I was treated a bit differently due to my post and the fact that I was already quite a ways through my training already. I don't know. It seemed weird. I spent most of my time at Bridge.
So when you were joining the Sea Org in Los Angeles in 96, did you also at that time not finish the EPF?
Correct.
Okay, because I was going to ask you, how is it that you were allowed to be on staff in Vancouver? You're not allowed to be on staff if you're former Sea Org, but it's going to be because you never finished the EPF.
Yep, exactly. I can tell the story about that if you're interested.
Oh yeah, tell me. I want to hear it.
Okay. I'll try and make this as concise as possible.
Right.
So 14 years old, I'm in Vancouver, hated school, and I was recruited to join the Sea Org. I went down there. Unfortunately, so my parents were divorced when I was about 10, and my mom had custody. However, she was living with a declared SP, and I did not like him. So I went to live with my dad for approximately 3 to 4 years before joining. My dad said it was fine for me to go down. I wasn't really in touch with my mom very much. So I went down, and then when my mom found out a couple weeks later, she lost her shit on it. And so she demanded that I come back up to Canada to basically convince her why I felt it was the right thing for me to do. Not for Scientology, but for me. So I did, and convinced her, had a good roads, good weather conversation with her and all this stuff. And then got her to agree, sign the papers, flew back down to LA. Shortly after, I was cleaning the galley on the EPF, mopping the floors underneath the massive, it's basically a steel floor with massive pots, and they have the pipes running. It's a big industrial kitchen. I slipped, my leg got caught underneath it, and I burnt my leg. Right.
Oh my
So
God.
a work incident. It was, and I was 14.
And what
So
year? This is 96.
This is 96. Yeah. So everything happens within a few months period in this story. So I burnt my leg. I went to ethics because obviously any kind of incident where you hurt yourself or get sick or anything, you're PTS. And so I got a PTS handling, and this was the first one I'd ever done. They showed me all these references, and they knew the situation with my mom. They actually had me disconnect from her. I hand wrote a letter, which I have now. As I was saying to you before, my mom has recently passed away, but she kept all this. And so when I was back at my mom's place a couple weeks ago, cleaning out her house, I found my letter, and she kept all this time.
Wow.
So I wrote her this disconnection letter, and then, and that was because I'd also, not only had I burnt my leg, but I also got really sick. It was kind of like light pneumonia, or a really, really heavy flu sort of thing. And that prompted them to make me do that. So I did. And I literally didn't talk to my mom for about 15 years after that.
Wow.
Due to this one incident. But when I was down there after writing this letter, I still wasn't getting better. And I think they just got kind of sick of me because I was kind of like, I was out ethics, to use Scientology terms. I've never been good with authority, being told what to do. And I just think, much like Alex from Apostate Alex, tons of backflash. That's just the way we are. So they said, okay, fine, you can leave, but you have to join staff at your class 5 org. I said, okay. That was my escape route. And so I did, and I joined DSA and was in the PR department essentially. And then at one point, predominantly was in charge of the drug-free marshals program.
You were?
Yeah, I was the in charge.
So it's actually hilarious to me, Scientology organizationally speaking, that they essentially kicked you out of the EPF for being PTS, but then let you join OSA, where no one's supposed to be if they're PTS.
Correct. Yeah.
So you were were you the DSA PR?
No. So I was directly under her. Her name was Joanna. She's still very active as well. But I was predominantly the drug-free marshal in charge. I mean, I was 14, right? It's a light post. But I was also involved in surveillance activities as well as a guard. Basically, my dad would be involved with it, so I would go along with him as well.
You had me at surveillance activities.
Yes.
As someone who worked in the DSA office, were you guys chummy with DSA staff from other orgs?
I don't remember being so, no, but I'm sure other people were. Like Susan Kerr, as mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
She was the DSA, and there was another gentleman in there that he was, I guess, the assistant PR. His name was Joel. He's no longer involved in Scientology, which is good. But yeah.
Okay, so you actually worked in OSA in Vancouver while Susan was the DSA.
Yeah.
Wow. I hope people who watch all these SPTV channels have come to see all of the former Scientologists that you hear from are connected by 1 degree of separation. That's just an example, one piece of evidence for how small Scientology really is.
Oh yeah, and especially in Vancouver. Vancouver's tiny. Like if they say, I think in Canada there was supposed to be like 50,000 Scientologists in the 70s, but there's no way that's possible. But if you look in the central files up in Vancouver, there probably is 50,000 folders full of book buyers and so forth. And that's the number they operate off of.
Right.
But like, so one of the worst posts in Scientology, of course, is call-in for events. I hated it.
Yes.
And no one wanted to do it. It was always a mandatory staff thing, but you're forced to do it. And you know, you look at the call-in list of active Scientologists, and it's maybe 200. And out of those, we might get 30 or 40 people at an event. Maybe, you know. So
yes. For the viewers, I always struggle with this question. People ask how many orgs are there in Canada? And I feel like I'm always forgetting some of the cities. So I know obviously there's Vancouver, Toronto, and Quebec. Quebec's a city, not a province, right?
yeah, so the org I think is Montreal.
Wait. Is Quebec a city or a province?
Quebec is a province.
Oh, it's a province. Okay.
Yeah.
So is Montreal the only org in Quebec?
I think so.
Yeah.
I couldn't be 100% on that. There is an org in Edmonton as well.
That's right. Edmonton.
And there's some missions, but
there's actually missions in Canada?
Yeah, so there's one there was one in Victoria. It was run by a couple. There used to be one in Vancouver. It was huge.
Really?
Well, huge for a mission, I guess.
Okay.
And I think there's a mission in Halifax. I think we just found out recently. But it's tiny.
So I don't count missions because, as you and I know, they're basically have an average of 1 to 0 public. Okay, so for Class 5 orgs in Canada, if we're talking about Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, what other orgs are in Canada?
Edmonton.
God, I've never think of Edmonton. Do you think
most people don't?
And so, are there truly only 4 Class 5 orgs in Canada?
I think so.
Okay, so honestly, and of course, there's the well, no, because
there's Cambridge as well.
It's a Class 5 org.
I think so. So Winnipeg. Here we go. Here's Gabe. Quebec, Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg. Oh yeah, Winnipeg. Forgot about that. Vancouver and Cambridge.
Wait, but she said Quebec and Montreal. She said Quebec and Montreal.
There must be 2 in there. That's on the other side of the country. I don't really.
But Quebec's a province, though. It should have a
city as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And there's a CLO in Toronto, but there's no advanced org. I mean,
well, there should be,
but it's not open. Like it's not delivering to public. It doesn't exist. It's not operational.
Okay. Yeah, and it wasn't when I was in.
Yeah.
Like I said, they had just bought it. So
rough math. There's no org in Canada. If you just say 200, I'm going to use it for public and staff, and this is a gross exaggeration because there's nowhere near this amount. But if you go 200 public and staff within 200 miles of any Class 5 org, that would be your high level, like generously exaggerating. Okay. Yeah. So if we say there's 6 orgs, you do not have more than 1,000 Scientologists in the entire country of Canada.
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let's see. I feel like I keep interrupting you with questions. What the hell were we talking about?
That's what we're here for.
How small Scientology is. That's right. So you just happened to actually work in the OSA department with my sister-in-law's mother. So there you go. So that makes us practically related.
Pretty much.
Okay, so you were so I was going to ask you, how does your staff experience compare to the Sea Org experience, but you never finished the EPF. So I would say you didn't have a true Sea Org experience.
No, absolutely not. And I would never purport to. I was always Class 5. And to be honest, that's the side of the story that is missing, I think, in SPTV. A lot of the major players, especially that are out right now, are ex-Sea Org. But there are probably 5 times as many Class 5 org and public who are out there who could be speaking out as well.
Totally.
And that's the case with Gabe in Escaping the Cultiverse A as well. And Apostate Alex. We're all just part of that team of lower level, less dedicated than you.
Well, I spent so many more years as a Class 5 staff member than I did as a Sea Org member. I mean, I was on staff from the age of 12 to 22. That's 10 years. And I guess there was 2 years where I took off there. So 8 years. And I was in the Sea Org for 4 years. But 3 of my Class 5 years was spent at Flag. So technically I wasn't in the Sea Org, but it was a Sea Org experience because this is back when the trainees lived in the Hacienda with the Sea Org members. So we lived with them, we worked with them, we ate with them. And being a trainee at Flag was the same thing as being a TTC or in the FSO. So it's like the same thing. But and honestly, I got to tell you, my staff experience compared to my Sea Org experience, I feel very strongly it is easier to be a Sea Org member than it is to be a staff member.
Yeah, in some regards, I would say that's probably true. Like, for people who don't know, if you're on class 5 org staff, you're doing, so I was on foundation most of the time. So I'm working from 6 to 10 every day, except for Thursday when we have a staff meeting, which would easily go 2 hours. So I'm doing a 6-hour day after a 7 or 8 hour day as a manual laborist, which is what I did. And then I would work Saturday, Sunday, 8 hours each day. So that's my life. Get home, go to sleep, get up, go to work, go to post, go home, over and over again.
Absolutely. So my early days on staff, because I wasn't supporting myself, I mean, I was still legally a child. I was able to be full time day foundation, 8:45 in the morning to 10:30 at night, 6 days a week. I guess I did take a day off. No, back then we didn't take a day off. We took a night off.
Slaughter.
So honestly, it would be, not even a day off. You take off at dinner time for one night.
Yeah.
But later on, when I was an adult and was supporting myself, just like you, I worked a moonlight job Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I was at the org 5 days a week, because again, I would take Friday night off. 5 days a week. So you get to the org at 6 p.m. Production ends at 10 p.m. You don't get out of there until 10:30. Got a 45-minute commute home. You're getting home 11:30 at night every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you work on the weekends as well. Now at my org in Philly, I'm trying to remember. I think on the weekends we used to go until 10, and then we sort of decided we were going to end off at 6. What did you guys do on the weekends?
I was 9 to 6.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was considered a luxury to be able to only work until 6 p.m. on the weekends.
Oh, and on top of that, so I don't think it's the case anymore, but every single staff member had to do what's called QM, which is quartermaster, or someone who basically is a security guard overnight. And so you would have to stay at the org all night to guard it, and you'd have to do rounds. So you'd have to stay up. But then you'd also have to go home, change, and then all the times go back on post.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So what else do you feel is really worthy of discussion from your experience, whether it's family stuff or staff stuff or stuff you've gone through since leaving Scientology? What do you want to talk about?
The most important thing for me at this point, obviously my stories in the past are really important, but it's just getting it out there that if you are on the bubble, if you are thinking about leaving, if you're watching this channel, just know that, as you were saying in your last video, Scientology is on the way out, and admitting to yourself that, and truly look around and see what the conditions actually are. That's what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, leaving is the ultimate result of what's happening now, right? Scientology is on the way out. The recovery process is a whole different beast, and it's different for every single person. For me, it's been extremely important to have someone in my life, my wife, who's in the chat here. And
which one is she in the chat?
So I married an ex-Scientologist.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's been such an amazing part of my recovery. She was never in Scientology. And in fact, she grew up a very easy, I wouldn't say easy, but like uneventful childhood as far as growing up. She had good supportive parents, no pressures to do things she didn't want to do, and she was given the opportunities, which is amazing. But she just sits down and listens to me. And when I finally did open up about my experience in Scientology, she has been extremely supportive and very helpful. So, and we watched a lot of stuff, a lot of the YouTube videos together.
How much of your Scientology experience did she know about before you guys got married?
Married, that's a good question. Before we got married, she knew that I was an ex-Scientologist. However, we hadn't really gotten too deep into it. The first memory, for people who don't know, Miss Withhold is when you think that someone has found you out about doing something that is wrong or something that you're trying to hide. So
But you're not sure.
you're not sure. That's the
Mhm.
important thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were driving downtown Vancouver, which is where she lived. And we were driving past the Church of Scientology after I was out. And she was driving. We looked over to the left. Hello, love. And she looked over and said, she just jokingly said, Scientology? And I'm sitting there. I'm like, does she know? So we hadn't discussed it yet, right? But
You
that
had
was
never
probably
mentioned it.
No, and that was probably the earliest memory that I remember of just like not feeling guilty necessarily, but like, oh, so it was kind of funny. But yeah, once I opened up, it was kind of a floodgate, and we've been talking about it since. So
I've always thought that being someone who never had anything to do with Scientology, marrying an ex, like a thorough, born and raised ex-Scientologist, has got to be one of the weirdest, craziest things. Like, because I just try to think, like, the things a former Scientologist would try to talk about sometimes. To the other person, it's got to sound like you're totally making this shit up. Like you can't be, like, it's got to be a joke. You're trying to pull some sort of prank on me. Like, and also it would be so hard to understand the crazy nature of some of the shit. Like if I try to put myself in the other person's shoes, I just feel like I would constantly be asking myself, how could anyone ever fall for this? Because that's one of the most common questions people have.
yeah, and she's extremely open-minded to. She's not judgmental at all, right? She's amazing, but it is difficult. And now we joke about it, but like body thetans and all this stuff is phenomenal. And so she did just make a comment in the comments there.
For it.
So, and the church helped him handle and break up with me. So, we had, so 3 years together. I'll just tell a quick story.
Go ahead.
I guess this would be, so we got together in 2010. In 2012, I kind of rejoined Scientology and then was recruited to Sea Org. But while I was just rejoining Scientology, they knew about her and that she has familial connections that per Scientology would be a no-go. So tax connections as well as police, high security police connections.
Ooh, the best kind.
Yeah. So in Canada, it's RCMP, and then also the CRA, which is like the Canada Revenue Agency.
So the RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right?
Yeah.
Is
And
that like your FBI?
No, sort of, not really. So they're a police force, they're federal, but they do high level, high security stuff as well, right? So,
well, I mean, our federal police force is the FBI.
That's a good point, actually, now that I think about it. So yeah, anyway, won't get into the RCMP part of it, but if you're a member of it, you're not being a Scientologist, and even being connected to it would make you PTS for sure, right? A no-go.
Right. Yeah.
So they actually convinced me that it was best for myself and the future of mankind, so I can be on staff, to break up with her, so that I could then ultimately join the Sea Org. And they were successful. So I think that's not exactly accurate, love, but CSIS would be the CIA of Canada.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think.
All right.
But regardless,
we can have a healthy debate about it in the live chat.
Exactly. So they basically convinced me to break up with her. And when I came back from the Sea Org, I immediately contacted her and said, I'm sorry. And we got back together. But
did she make you do lower conditions?
No, she didn't. She wasn't aware of those. But it's funny. I realized the other day, after I've only been doing this for a month, so I'm pretty new into it. But I realized right now I'm doing a liability condition to mankind, not to Scientology. Like I'm making up the damage, and I'm delivering an effective blow, and it's so funny. I wasn't actively doing it, but it's what's happening. So
it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
What the hell were we talking about before I interrupted you? Oh, you were telling the story of them making you break up with her.
Yeah. So
How did you explain to her when you went back what had happened?
I didn't. So when I left, I like all my friends, because I was well established as far as a friendship and a community.
Mm.
And I actually told them that I was going to work for a job in publishing, not Scientology publishing, which was not a lie. It's an acceptable truth. Um, and that was what I was said I was doing. And so that's what everyone believed. I was just in a publishing job and working in sales and so forth. Yeah.
Wow.
But then when I came back, I just basically said that tail between my legs, basically said I made a mistake and, all that stuff. So, yeah. Then we got married.
One of these days, we'll have to do a chat with your wife as well, because I'm dying to know what it's like to marry a former Scientologist.
Yeah. And we do have some videos on my channel so far.
Oh, do you?
Yes. And
Here,
yesterday,
Go ahead.
if
Go ahead.
anyone wants to laugh, so yesterday, little backstory, I got all the LRH EDs as my mom had them all in her possession. And one of them is a fable. It's LRH ED 47 int. And we worked on an amazing PowerPoint presentation animating this. It's on my channel now. It just came out yesterday.
No
But if you
way.
want to laugh, it's about 16 minutes long. You got to check it out.
Is it a live or a video?
It's a video. So you'll see it. The first one, a fortuitously found fair game fable. And this is an actual LRHED read word for word and animated by PowerPoint. And it's hilarious. So check it out.
That is
That's my wife there.
So you have all the LRHED packs? Are there like 3 of them?
Yep.
Wow. I
And-
won't put the. Oh my God, you guys did this?
Well, my wife made the PowerPoint. It's hilarious. And she's very proud of it.
Holy cow. Okay, give me the brief rundown on what the fable is.
Okay. So it's an anti-psychiatry fable where, it's going to be so difficult. Basically, the wolves represent the psychiatrists, and they come into a flock of sheep and some shepherds.
Okay.
And they're offering to take care of and handle the sheep for some money from the farmer, and the farmer representing, I guess, society. And then an old ram comes in, which is LRH and his mates. They come in and take care of the wolves. But the thing that's so disingenuous about this is right at the beginning of the LRHED, LRH says this was found. He didn't write it. This was like just by the sheer coincidence, he found this fable. And this was in 1968. So just prior to 1969, which is the formation of CCHR, which is the anti-psychiatry front group. So it's just this rallying thing for Scientologists. It's ludicrous that anybody would believe that he didn't write it. And it's written so badly.
Oh my God.
But it's pretty funny.
You might. I don't know many people who have those packs of LRHEDs because I don't recall them ever being for sale.
No. So these are from, so my mom was the flag banking officer in the 90s.
Oh.
And she left. So she has old propaganda stuff talking about how the FBI is going in Scientology, all the older books, like just crazy stuff. Most of it's
Wow.
mundane, but then we find these little gems of LRH wisdom.
Wow. Oh, I remember the last I had asked you what was another like major part of your story that you wanted to discuss. And I forget what your answer was, but that's how we got off onto that tangent.
Yeah.
How about I want to talk to you briefly more about just the idea of leaving Scientology, that path for you. So 2012, correct me if I get the dates wrong. 2012 is when you were back down in LA on the EPF, right?
Yeah.
They send you back. When they sent you back to work in the OSA office, that was after 96, right?
Yeah.
So what happened after 2012? That's right. You told Hans that you wanted out of there, and they send you back. You undoubtedly pissed off a lot of important people by doing that. So what happened
including
between
Dave and the Scabbage, I think.
Including Dave?
This was like a very high level. So Emily, the CPLO at the time, was going towards I don't know what post it was, but it was a very important post she was taking over. So it was important that I arrived. There was a lot of pressure put on it.
Oh, that's right. You were in training to replace her, but so she didn't. Sometimes they'll send someone off before they're even replaced. But in your case, she was stuck where she was until you finished your training and came back.
Correct.
Oh, so you screwed everything up.
Yeah.
So then what happened between, how much time was there between 2012 and whenever you consider you left Scientology? Maybe you can define that sort of, like, what happened and when do you consider you left?
You know, that's a really good question. I don't know if I could pinpoint it specifically, but I consider myself mentally to be done with it at that point.
Ah,
I wasn't fully, like, I was still connected with people, but I was still getting calls, emails, you know, all this stuff. But it was one point where I was working in a retail job, and they found out where I worked because I was kind of off to the side, and they called me at my work, a Sea Org member, wanting to recover me,
wow.
and that was where I kind of like, that's it, and I let her have it. I told her all kinds of stuff that she shouldn't know, and I said, if you contact me anymore, it's going to be big trouble. Like, I am going to do something that you will not want me to do. And that was pretty much the last time I heard from them. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So were you ever informed that you were officially declared a suppressive person?
I'm not.
Really?
No, I mean, I probably am now or will be
Yeah.
shortly, especially being on your channel, which is my dream come true. And, you know, and I would love to see that goldenrod. I know they don't do them anymore because it's bad PR.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, if you want to, strictly speaking, it's against L. Ron Hubbard policy not to, but regardless, I think that prior to my YouTube channel, I could just walk in and I would just be labeled what they call PTS or sour. And I could get a handling and just jump right back on.
Yeah. Yeah. But now you're joining the SPTV community. There's no going back.
Proud of it.
There's no going back.
Nope.
Well, I guess all I would say is if you happen to still be in touch with under the radar folks who will almost certainly be called in and shown your goldenrod, if any of those under the radar folks are just on the you know, right on the fence and ready to become a full-blown SP, the moment they show you that goldenrod, you should grab it and run for the door. Because I want to see one. It's been a while since I've seen a recent, honest to God, you know, SP declare goldenrod, and I would love to see if they've changed that language that they've used, or any. I mean, I don't know. Like, people were shown my goldenrod, but I've never been informed by Scientology that I'm declared. But they still showed my goldenrod to other people who then told me that they saw it, but I never even got a letter.
No, well, they can't. They can't change anything. That's the thing. Like, people who are not in Scientology, they probably know, but they can't truly understand. Nothing's changed. I've done a couple of videos just explaining how things were done in like the 60s and so forth, and gone over policies from these LRHEDs, and literally nothing's changed until now.
Yeah.
It just
I mean, technically speaking, you're not supposed to be able to change policy. You and I know that. They're supposed to be permanently enforced. But then you can point to, like, you know, 6 to a dozen major basic things in Scientology that Miscavige has changed. But, you know, in order to get away with making those changes, he has to convince people it's what L. Ron Hubbard really wanted.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, some suppressive clerical worker who altered the original handwritten policy, you know, all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like, so many things have changed, but do you know what I'm?
But the basics haven't. I mean, literally the basic books have, but you know,
the most basic of basics have, but
Yeah.
the other basics haven't.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is true that they will change. David Miscavige will change things in order to push his agenda and retain control and so forth. But ultimately, I think that all the basic operations remain the same. The basic actions that they have to go by are basically the same.
It's true. Totally true. So when you were in the Vancouver org, how many staff members? Was it a Dan Foundation org, or was it one org that, like, Philly was never Dan Foundation? I mean, it was never split up into 2 orgs. Was Vancouver a Dan Foundation org?
Yep. It was Dan Foundation. I spent time when I was in 96, when I was 14, I was on day. And then as an adult, I always joined Foundation because I had jobs.
So best that you can recall. And again, this is, so it's almost 30 years now. How many staff members were at Vancouver Day when you were there?
You know what? I couldn't even guess. I don't think
okay.
there's ever been more than 30 staff members.
It seems like
actively.
that's the sweet spot. It seems like that's the
Mhm.
sweet spot for any org. 35 is like really good. 50 would make you one of the bigger orgs in the world, having 50 staff.
Yep.
You know?
So on that note, so I found a letter as well when going through my mom's stuff, because the person that she was with was declared. She actually wrote a letter to Peter Byrne, who was the executive director of Vancouver Day at the time in the 90s, asking, what the heck's happening with this guy?
Mm.
And he wrote back that if there had been a functioning HCO, then maybe this wouldn't have happened, etc. So back in the 90s, if you think about the most fundamental posts in an organization, HCO is supposed to be the first that's manned, because that's the one that establishes the church in the organization. So that didn't exist back then. So I can't imagine there was more than 30.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you were on foundation, remind me again about what year that would have been.
So whenever the basics came out, 2007, I was on, as well as in 2012.
Okay, cool. So in 2012, best you can recall, how many staff did Vancouver Foundation have?
Yeah, so I think it was around 30 to 40.
Yeah.
And Gabe would know a bit more. I think she just said earlier there was about 40 when she left, which was 1 year past me.
And does Vancouver already have its ideal org building?
No, but they've been raising money. And I tell you what, that's one of the biggest things that was there for me in the back of my mind, was just the sheer amount of money that's being raised at these things. Because Vancouver real estate's, it's massive. When I was there, when they first started, we were talking like 20 million Canadian dollars. So maybe, less American, but by now it's got to be 30, 40 million. And there's not enough people in Vancouver to raise that money.
Right.
And they were consistently taking money from my dad and from people I know who don't have that money. I didn't grow up rich in any, I barely had clothes, for school. So the fact that he's giving all this money to Scientology, it always kind of bothered me.
It's amazing. So Vancouver, it's almost like, on the one hand, you'd think that Scientologists in Vancouver, because it costs so much to live in Vancouver, that perhaps those Scientologists would be on the higher end of the income scale. Perhaps it'd be easier for them to fund such a building, because a building in Vancouver, I mean, you probably saw the video I did earlier today about Austin.
Yeah.
Just for the building in Austin, they had to raise $23 million.
It's insane.
And that's for, combined day and foundation, maybe they have 60 staff, but pretty much any org in the world, combined day and foundation, doesn't have more than 60 staff. And they're having to, and so a building in Vancouver, if they had to raise 23 million in Austin, Texas. Now, to be fair, Austin's a pretty expensive city these days, but Vancouver's insane expensive.
Oh yeah. It's mind-bogglingly expensive. We live where we live now because we can't afford to live in Vancouver. We make fine money, but yeah, it's just there's no chance. Your mortgage payments would be just insane.
Yeah. So I remember the Ideal Org fundraising started in earnest sometime between 2004 and 2006, but a little 2005, 2006. And so what? How many years? So we're talking 18 years, and the Scientologists in Vancouver still haven't been able to raise enough funds to buy their building. Now, to be fair, about half the orgs in the world, we're going on almost 20 years, this fundraising strategy has been in existence. Almost half the orgs in the world still haven't raised enough money. And if they haven't been able to raise the money up until now, there's just no way. If you haven't been able to do it in the first 18 years, it doesn't get easier in the next 18. It only gets harder. You've already squeezed so much blood from that stone.
Yeah. And the stones are all dropping off. Right.
Yeah.
So there are quite a few whales in Vancouver. With connections to Clearwater, obviously, because they're all OTs.
Mm-hmm.
There is, of course, Susan and Doug Kerr, who are the partners there. The Morphopolis or the Morphopoli. So,
are they from Vancouver?
So Paris, who's down in Clearwater there, he has three brothers. There's Eris, George and Tazos, or Taz Morphopoulos.
There's Paris and Eris.
Yeah.
Their parents must have hated them.
Yeah. But
if I was to be fair, have you met Paris? He's a real douche.
I have not met Paris, but I met Eris, and he's also a douche. Taz I worked for him for a little bit while he was on OT7, and it was a home office. So picture like a townhouse, a bedroom, basically a spare bedroom used as an office, and then next door was his auditing room. And so I'd be there in the office. He'd tootle off for about 15 minutes, do a session a bunch of times a day. I'd hear his alarm going off in the safe where he kept all his secret materials. But yeah, he was a douche. And then I don't know if he's very active now or not, but there was a gentleman named Michael Knott who was very much into financials and stuff like that. And he was a big donor. There's the Rockles, who are, you might recognize. They're pretty prolific.
Them. I know them because when they would come to Clearwater for their Hillary Rockle, right?
Yeah.
When they would come to Clearwater for their 6-month checks on OT7, they were very close with my wife's parents. So they would always come over. In fact, they were the ones, I've told this story, they had just come back from a visit to the Free Winds, which is weird because they're already OT8. You're like, what are you going to the Free Winds for? They're like, we did our OT9 and 10 eligibility. This was like 15 years ago. And it's like, man. So you went to the Free Winds to pay top dollar to get sec checked, and they convinced you were doing your OT9 and 10 eligibility. Good job.
Yeah, brutal. Oh, so funny story. Now that I thought about it, because that's the way my brain works. Speaking of OT8s and all the powers, my wife and I were out at a restaurant nearby, and I look over and I see 2 OT8s. They're Leonie and Paul Price. They're pretty famous in the Vancouver area. And I'm like, I bet you I could probably get their attention. And so I started projecting thoughts towards them to see if they could pick it up as OT8s. Because of course they could, right? And my wife was aware of what I was doing. We were kind of joking, right? And so nothing happened. Didn't even look up. And then as they were leaving, I say, oh, hey, it's Jeff. And hi, Paul and Leonie. They're like, oh, who are you? They're very old, right? But like they didn't even recognize me. But I spent so much time with them. Like you would not believe how many times I conversed with them on staff, and they couldn't even remember me at all. And that's the power of an OT8.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes. It's easy for me to kind of make fun of people who've been OT8 for 30 years and still believe OT9 and 10 are coming. But, it's like if I was in their shoes, I probably would have fucking believed it. Yeah. I never did the OT levels when I was in Scientology. So it's easy to go like, holy shit, how can people get to OT8 and stay in Scientology? Like at some point when you realize you didn't get any full OT powers. You know that telepathically talking to BTs did not, relieve your amnesia on the whole track and free you from the cycle of birth to death. How can you continue to be in Scientology when you know it's all bullshit? And it's one of the things I want to do. I keep saying I want to do this and I never do it, is just talk to as many people who had done OT8 as possible and try to get a better understanding for what did you honest to God still believe in after you'd finished? What was there left to still believe in?
Yeah. Well, I think so. Hillary went, and actually her husband Ray both went OT8 quite a while ago. And I've spoken to them, and their kind of deal is they know they're waiting for something. And so they're on OT committees and they're doing all these activities to push Scientology to the point where they can get their next step. And that's obviously not their only motivation, but that's the carrot that's dangled in front of their face, is you just got to do a little bit more. Yeah. But obviously that will never actually come. So,
yeah. Being an OT8 in Scientology these days, it's like, especially if you've been in Scientology for 20 or 30 years, it's like, just look at all of the destruction. Look at all the broken families. Look at all the bankruptcies. Look at all the suicides. Look at all the whatever, and go, how is that the product of, how do you not see that is the product of Scientology? Now, you and I both know it can easily be explained away by out tech and out ethics and PTSness, and David Miscavige found the why and he found the who, and it's all getting better now. And it's like, yeah, but that's what even David Miscavige has been saying for 40 years now.
Yep.
I've fixed it all. It's all going to be better from here on out. And then 10 years later, oh, we found the SPs. We shut them from guns. It's all going to be better from here on out. And it's like, eventually, you're always going to be able to bullshit some of the people all of the time. But man, he's been getting with bullshitting all of the OT8s all of the time. I mean, it seems it's very rare you get an OT8 leaving Scientology these days, or if they do, they're not speaking out.
I think they're afraid to. Like, one of the reasons I didn't speak out for the longest time is there's a stigma of just being embarrassed. Like, this is a difficult thing to do, right? Putting it out there for everyone to see that you were conned and duped and wasted most of your life, supporting an organization that, does all these abuses and so forth. It's just, it's difficult. And it really takes, not to toot my own horn, but it takes a lot of like courage to do it. And that's why I've joined and I've been supporting the SBTV community before it was even, an actual community. It's important.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, let me show everyone your channel here again. PTS for life. And cool. That's cool that you're already doing live streams. I love that.
Oh, it's so much easier than recording.
Yeah.
You just throw it out there. You wipe
That's
your
right.
hands, but you're done.
I know.
I do. I try to do one a day. And just
have you really been doing that much?
It's only, yeah. So I took 8 days off because I was handling my mom's estate, but yeah, pretty much one a day. And now you're
well, no wonder you're not showing up on my feed. I wasn't subscribed. Super. Oh, look, there's the LRHTD pack. How about it?
Project Squirrel is another good video too.
Oh, dude, with those packs, man, that's an endless source of freaking content.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is great.
And of course,
look, you're really good at thumbnails too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who wants to look at this face as a thumbnail, right?
Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, hey, anytime you want to have some anecdote or some story or something, if you're watching one of my videos and you're like, hey, let's do a, I got something I want to add on that subject. Let's do a conversation about that. Just hit me up and we'll do something.
Endless stories.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Oh, actually, there's some super chats here. Let's see. Eddie Ops. Ever meet the identical twins in the New York City Center? Man, I haven't been in the New York org. Even when I was in Scientology, we almost like in Philly, which is only a couple hours south of New York. We'd go up there once in a blue moon for an IAS patrons ball or something like that. But man, I don't know almost anybody from the New York org. I had no idea there was identical twins in the New York org. Do you know anything about that?
I know nothing about that.
All right. Throwy. Pack EPFIC around 2012 was the legendary James Burns.
That name sounds familiar.
Oh, well, James Burns, legendary Sea Org member. When I was at Flag, he was actually the COFLB. He was one of the first Sea Org members. I mean, he's old as shit now. And then when I was at PAC in the Sea Org, he was put on some post they invented just for him. The SO image, the Sea Org ethics the ethics image officer. It was SO Sea Org ethics and image. He wasn't his job was literally just to show up to musters and do marching with the crews.
Oh.
And then he would beg everybody to write commendations for him because he needed them to send to COB. It was really sad.
That is sad. And he was super old at that point.
He was super old at that point. He was on some reduced schedule. Somehow he'd managed to marry some really young, hot fundraiser in the superpower office, this young Hungarian girl. I was like, that's disgusting. But somehow he had pulled that off. Yeah. There's no way they're still married now. He's still alive, I believe.
It's really quite disgusting because even when I was down there was quite a few older people, and you just watch them going up and down stairs and like trying to get to post on time, and they can barely walk. They're older and they just need to have their retirement, and it's gross. Yeah, I kind of feel bad for James Byrne, but he's been around for so long, honestly. I mean, it's hard to consider James Byrne a victim of all this. I mean, he's been around since, the Sea Org was created in 1967. He was in the Sea Org before it was the Sea Org. Like, he was when it was just the Sea Project.
And honestly, 67. So what? That's 33 plus 23, 36. Yeah, 56 years this guy has been in, and he's seen it all. He's done it all. He knows everything. It's not like this guy doesn't understand what's really going on. I just feel bad for anyone who's literally lost their entire life to Scientology and the SEER, you know.
But he's still working for commendations.
He's still working for commendations.
Like at that point, you've proven your worth.
Yeah.
You should just be able to do your thing if you wanted to be there. But that's not how it works in Scientology.
Yeah.
If you screw up and your stats aren't up, your head's in the chopping block, because that's what LRH said.
Yeah. Andrew Humphrey, Quebec City is the capital province of Quebec. I've been to Quebec once for a conference, nothing to do with Scientology. I got to tell you, I feel like I would remember if there was an org in Quebec City. I do not remember. They would call it the Quebec City org.
There is one.
There really is one. So 100%. Do they just what is it called? The Quebec org?
Quebec.
What?
I don't know.
Okay, fine. I'll take your word for it. I believe you.
Never mind. It's fine. I won't say that.
What were you going to say?
No. I'll get in trouble.
Gary Gunnels, 90s. I was in alt group. Is that the altreligion.ars? Alt religion? Is that what he's talking about?
Yeah, I was there too.
Were you really?
Yep. So
how did that
very
happen?
quickly? We can definitely do a whole video on this separately, but I was very into computers back then, and it was the whole burgeoning internet and so forth. So I was doing computer programming, and I'd just be on forums, and I came across this. I actually read the OT levels when they were released on that news group.
Wow.
I didn't know what the heck they were, and I felt unbelievably guilty and scared that I was going to die because of it. But yeah, I read them.
Did you ever have to later confess to anyone in Scientology that you'd read it?
Never came up on a sec check.
Oh, you're so lucky. If it came up, oh my goodness, that would have been a big deal.
But you know what did come up on a sec check was delving in other practices. And you know what that practice was? Yoga. Isn't that stupid?
It's so stupid.
And I was like, I'm not meditating. I'm just stretching. It's like, oh, just tell me about it. I was like, okay.
You know, the fact that Scientology's certain of its policies are enforced by these virgin teenagers who are in the ethics officer posts, who don't know a single damn thing about the world, right? Who doesn't even have the mental capacity to understand that there's a difference between like being a yogi and going to a yoga studio to stretch.
Yeah.
I mean,
this was just at home. And this wasn't a kid. This was a grad 5 auditor who was like 50 years old.
Oh my God.
But it read on the meter, so therefore we have to take it up.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Speckwall, thank you for the super sticker. Guys, one more time, check out Jeff's YouTube channel, PTS for Life, doing a lot of live streams with his wife. Let's do another chat sometime soon with your wife. I'd love to pick her brain. It'd be amazing.
We can set that up. And next time I won't send us live beforehand.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end. And we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs,